I've learned that sometimes, the smallest moments can lead to the biggest mistakes of your life. One glance held too long. One laugh that feels just a little too intimate. One brush of a hand that leaves your skin tingling hours later. That's how it all began for me, not with a bang, but with something so subtle I didn't even realize I was walking straight into trouble. My name is Emily. I've been married to Mark for 8 years. We live in a modest 2-story house in a quiet suburb, the kind of neighborhood where people wave from their driveways but never really get too close. My life was fine, stable, predictable. And maybe that was the problem. Mark is a good man, but in the past year, it felt like we'd been living as roommates more than husband and wife. We shared bills, a bed and a routine, but not much else. The long talks we used to have before falling asleep had turned into both of us scrolling through our phones until we drifted off. The morning kisses had faded into quick goodbyes at the door. I told myself it was just the natural drift of marriage, that things would get better eventually. Then came Jason. Jason joined our company about 6 months ago. Tall, with that easy, confident smile that makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. He wasn't just attractive, he was charming in a way that made you lean in without realizing it. He'd walk past my desk and say things like, "Morning, sunshine," with a grin that reached his eyes. At first, I brushed it off as friendliness. I'd been working at the company long enough to know that a little office banter was normal. But Jason was different. He remembered things. Like the fact that I took my coffee with just a splash of cream, no sugar. Or that I'd been working late last Thursday because of a big client deadline. It was a Tuesday evening when things shifted. Most of the office had already cleared out, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the quiet. I was buried in spreadsheets, my neck aching from staring at the screen. Jason appeared beside my desk, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, placing one beside my keyboard. I smiled. "Thanks. You didn't have to." "I know," he said, his voice lower now, softer. "But I wanted to." Something in the way he said it made my pulse quicken. I glanced up, and for a second, our eyes held longer than they should have. I felt heat rise in my cheeks and quickly looked back at my screen. We talked for a bit after that, about work, about how quiet the office felt when everyone else was gone. But beneath the surface, there was something else happening. A current. I could feel it in the way his gaze lingered when I laughed, in the way he leaned just a little closer when he spoke. When I finally packed up to leave, Jason walked with me to the elevator. As we stood there waiting, our shoulders brushed just barely. It was nothing, really. Just 2 people standing close in a small space. But I swear I felt it in my bones. That night, lying in bed beside Mark, I couldn't stop replaying the moment. The coffee, the look, the brush of his shoulder. It was ridiculous. I was a married woman, and Jason was just a coworker. And yet, I caught myself smiling in the dark, feeling that small rush of excitement I hadn't felt in years. The next morning, I told myself to keep my distance. But Jason made that impossible. He stopped by my desk with a joke about the terrible office printer, and somehow we ended up talking about music. He teased me about my playlist choices, then sent me a song link through our work chat later that day. It became our thing. Little messages, small inside jokes, passing each other notes hidden inside file folders during meetings. Harmless, or so I kept telling myself. One afternoon, I was in the break room pouring coffee when Jason walked in. He stood close enough that I could smell his cologne, warm, woodsy, and completely distracting. "Working late again tonight?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "Looks like it," I said. "Big project due tomorrow." "I'll be here too," he said, his voice dropping just slightly. "Guess it's just you and me." My heart gave a small, traitorous flutter. I forced a smile. "Yeah, guess so." That evening, the office was nearly empty again. We worked in our respective corners, but every so often, I'd catch him glancing at me. Once, I looked up at the exact moment he did, and neither of us looked away immediately. By the time we both packed up to leave, the tension was undeniable. In the elevator, Jason's hand brushed mine as we both reached for the button. It was such a small thing, but it sent a jolt through me. "Good night, Emily," he said as the doors opened, his voice warm, his eyes holding mine for a moment longer than necessary. "Good night," I replied, my throat suddenly dry. Driving home, I tried to convince myself that it was just harmless flirting, the kind of thing people do to pass the time at work. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel the pull, like a magnet I couldn't, or maybe didn't want to resist. That night, Mark asked about my day while half watching the TV. I told him it was fine. I didn't tell him about the coffee, the glances, the small touches. I didn't tell him that for the first time in a long time, someone had made me feel seen. Looking back, I think that was the moment I crossed the first invisible line. Not physically, not yet. But in my mind, I had already stepped closer to Jason than I should have. And once you start down that path, it's only a matter of time before you can't turn back. I kept telling myself it wouldn't happen again. That the moment in the conference room was just a reckless slip, a heat-of-the-moment thing, something I could sweep under the rug of my conscience. But lies have a way of comforting you right before they tear you apart. 4 days after that stolen kiss, Michael and I acted like nothing happened. We exchanged polite hellos in the hallways, discussed work in professional tones, and sent emails that were strictly business. On the surface, it looked like we'd moved on. Inside, I was fighting a constant battle between guilt and temptation. The problem was temptation always won. It started with lingering eye contact during meetings, then casual conversations in the break room that stretched too long. And then the texting began. At first, it was innocent, sharing memes, complaining about work deadlines, small talk about the weather. But over time, those texts became a lifeline we both clung to. "I keep thinking about the other day," he wrote one afternoon. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. "Me too, but we can't." "Can't or don't want to?" That one question shifted everything. By Friday, I was wearing my favorite fitted dress to work, the one my husband used to say made my curves dangerous. I told myself it was just a coincidence, but when I caught Michael looking at me like he was undressing me with his eyes, I knew better. We had a late afternoon project deadline, which meant most of a team cleared out after lunch. It was just the two of us in the office. I was typing away at my desk when I heard his footsteps behind me. He leaned down, his breath warm against my ear. "You're driving me crazy," he whispered. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs, and my fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Michael," I whispered back, my voice barely audible. "Lock the door," he said. Every cell in my body screamed no, but my hands didn't listen. I rose, walked to the office door, and turned the lock. My mind was a hurricane of guilt and desire, but the moment he pulled me into him, lips crashing against mine, I stopped thinking altogether. We didn't make it to the couch. Paper slid off my desk as he lifted me onto it, his hands exploring as if he'd been waiting for this forever. I knew we were crossing a line we could never uncross, but God, it felt so good to finally give in. I'd be lying if I said I thought about my husband in that moment. I didn't. I thought about how Michael's touch made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I thought about how every stolen glance had led to this. And I thought about how badly I wanted more. We didn't hear the faint sound of footsteps outside until it was too late. A sharp knock at the door snapped us both back to reality. I scrambled to fix my dress while Michael ran a hand through his hair. "Who is it?" I called out, trying to steady my breathing. "Janet. Senior management needs the quarterly report. Is Michael in there with you?" My blood ran cold. Janet wasn't just any senior staff. She was the office gossip queen. If she suspected anything, it would spread faster than wildfire. Michael cleared his throat. Yeah, just going over some project details with her." "Give us a minute." I looked at him, eyes wide with panic. He mouthed, "It's fine." But I knew it wasn't. Janet's tone had a hint of suspicion. When we finally opened the door, she scanned both of us with the kind of smirk that said she'd already made up her mind. The rest of the day was a blur. I couldn't focus on work. Every time my phone buzzed, I thought it was Janet sending a mass email exposing us. I avoided the break room, the hallways, anywhere I might bump into her. By the time I got home, I was emotionally drained. My husband was sitting on the couch watching TV, completely unaware of the chaos inside my head. "How was work?" he asked casually. "Busy," I replied, forcing a smile. I wanted to confess everything, to tell him that I'd crossed a line and I didn't know how to get back. But instead, I kissed him on the cheek and went upstairs to take a long shower. Under the hot water, I thought about how easily Michael could ruin me. One text, one careless word, and my marriage, my career, my life gone. And yet, the thought of never touching him again made my chest ache. By Monday, Janet hadn't said a word. No raised eyebrows in meetings, no whispers in the hallway. But the silence didn't feel like safety, it felt like a storm brewing. I could almost hear the clock ticking down to the moment everything exploded. Still, that didn't stop me from meeting Michael again. This time, it wasn't in the office. He suggested a small diner across town, somewhere no one from work would recognize us. We sat in a back booth, far from the windows, sipping coffee like two regular colleagues having a meeting. But under the table, his hand found mine. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "I'm not avoiding you," I lied. "Yes, you are. Is it because of Janet?" I hesitated. "She knows something. I can feel it." "Then we'll be careful," he said. "No more risks at the office." It should have been a relief, but instead, it felt like an invitation. If we weren't going to stop, then we were only going to get deeper. As I sat there, watching his eyes darken with the same hunger I felt, I realized something. I was past the point of no return. I wasn't just dabbling in danger anymore, I was living in it. And if you're listening to this right now, you can probably guess where this is heading. So before the next chapter unravels, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that make your heart race and your palms sweat. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when secrets start to slip. I left the diner that day knowing my life was about to spiral in ways I couldn't control. And part of me didn't care. Because sometimes, when the fire feels this good, you forget it can burn you alive. It was almost 2 weeks since the kiss in the storage room, yet my heart still raced whenever I thought about it. The way Ethan's lips had felt on mine, the rough grip of his hand on my waist, the heat in his eyes, it had all burned itself into my memory. I'd replayed it so many times that it was becoming dangerous. We told ourselves it was a mistake, that it had just been an impulsive moment. But deep down, we both knew better. That kiss had unlocked a door neither of us truly wanted to close. The office felt different now. Every passing glance, every casual smile carried something more. When he stood too close, my skin tingled. When he brushed past me, it was all I could do to keep my breathing steady. At home, I was a different woman. To my husband, Mark, I tried to be the same caring, supportive wife. I still cooked dinner, still asked about his day, still laughed at his dry jokes. But inside, there was a part of me that was already somewhere else. Still in that storage room, still tasting Ethan's mouth, still craving the thrill. One Friday afternoon, it happened again. We had both stayed late to finish a project. Everyone else had gone home, and the office was eerily quiet. The hum of the air conditioner and the faint tapping of Ethan's fingers on the keyboard were the only sounds. When I walked over to his desk to hand him a file, our fingers brushed. My heart skipped. "Careful," he murmured, his eyes locking on mine. "You keep touching me like that, and I won't be able to stop myself again." The air between us felt heavy. My stomach twisted, not in guilt, but in want. I should have walked away. I should have told him no. But instead, I found myself leaning on the edge of his desk, watching the way his lips curved into a slow smile. "You think I haven't been thinking about it?" I whispered. That was all it took. He stood, closing the space between us. His hand slid up my arms, then tangled into my hair as he kissed me again, harder, more desperate than before. I melted into him, letting the moment sweep me away. It was dangerous, reckless, but I didn't care. The rest of the world faded until there was only us. That's when the sound came. A sharp click, the unmistakable noise of the door opening. We froze. My eyes flew to the entrance. Standing there, half hidden in the shadows, was Mr. Thompson, our department's senior manager. He was in his late 50s, with a sharp gaze that missed nothing. And right now his eyes were on us. The blood drained from my face. Ethan's grip loosened immediately, and I stepped back as if burned. Mr. Thompson didn't speak right away. He simply looked at us, his expression unreadable, then slowly closed the door behind him. "I see you two are busy," he said finally, his voice calm but laced with something dangerous. Panic surged through me. "Mr. Thompson, this isn't—" "Oh, don't insult me," he cut in. "I've been in this business too long. I know exactly what I walked in on." Ethan straightened, trying to sound composed. "Sir, this is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Mr. Thompson gave a short, humorless laugh. I've seen the way you two look at each other these past weeks. The whispers, the lingering touches. Did you really think no one noticed? My mouth went dry. This was it. If he reported us, it could destroy everything. My job, my marriage, my reputation. I'm not here to play moral judge, he continued, his eyes shifting between us. But I am here to protect this company. Office affairs have a way of becoming messy. Very messy. I swallowed hard. Please, Mr. Thompson, I can explain. I don't want your explanations, he said sharply. I want assurance that this, whatever it is, stops. Now. There was a long silence. Ethan and I exchanged a brief glance. My heart was pounding, so hard I thought it might burst. Finally, Ethan nodded. Understood. Mr. Thompson studied us a moment longer, then turned to leave. But before stepping out, he paused, his voice low and deliberate. You're both adults. Do what you will outside these walls. But if I ever catch this happening here again, there will be consequences you won't like. The door clicked shut behind him. I stood frozen for a few seconds, my chest tight. My hands were trembling. That's it, I whispered. We have to stop. Ethan sighed, raking a hand through his hair. You really think we can? Yes, I said firmly, though my voice wavered. We have no choice. But deep down, even as I said it, I knew the truth. The moment I felt his eyes on me again, the moment I remembered the way he made me feel, all my resolve would crumble. The weekend that followed was a haze of anxiety. I avoided Ethan's texts. I kept myself busy with Mark, going shopping, having dinner with friends, even watching movies on the couch like we used to. I tried to bury what had happened under layers of normalcy, but my body betrayed me. At night, when Mark's arm was draped over me in bed, my mind drifted to Ethan. The way his hands felt, the way his voice dropped when he wanted me. By Monday morning, the tension was unbearable. When I walked into the office, he was already there, leaning against my desk with a coffee in hand. His smile was casual, but his eyes, they were anything but innocent. We should talk, he said quietly. I hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. About what happened? About what's going to happen next, he replied. The sound of his words sent a rush of heat through me, despite my better judgment. That day, we worked side by side as if nothing had happened. But every time our hands brushed, every time our eyes met across the room, the same question echoed in my mind. Was I willing to risk everything for this? And as much as I wanted to say no, the truth was already written in my heart. By the end of the week, Mr. Thompson's warning felt like a shadow that followed me everywhere. I knew he was watching us closely now. Every movement, every interaction, it all carried weight. But temptation is a strange thing. It doesn't care about consequences. It only cares about the moment. And in the weeks to come, that moment would come again. And this time, it wouldn't end with a warning. If you've been holding your breath waiting to see what happens when a secret gets too big to hide, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Because in this story, the fall is coming, and it's going to be messy. The HR office felt colder than the rest of the building, even though the air conditioning had been broken for weeks. I sat in the leather chair, my palms sweating against the smooth surface, while the clock on the wall ticked far too loudly. I could hear every second that passed, each one bringing me closer to whatever was about to happen. Karen, the senior staff who had caught me and Alex in the storage room, stood by the desk, her arms folded tightly across her chest. She wasn't saying much, but her silence was heavy. The kind of silence that makes your stomach churn because you know it's not going to end well. Across from me sat Mr. Daniels, the HR manager, a man with kind eyes but a strict manner. I knew he had seen everything in his years of dealing with workplace drama, but somehow I doubted he'd ever dealt with this. So, Mr. Daniels began, his voice slow, deliberate. Karen tells me she walked in on you and Alex engaging in inappropriate behavior during work hours. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry, my hands fidgeted in my lap. It wasn't. I started but stopped. What was I going to say? That it wasn't what it looked like. Because it was exactly what it looked like. Karen's eyes narrowed. Do you want me to describe what I saw, or are you ready to admit it? Heat rushed to my face. Shame, embarrassment, and a strange flicker of anger at her for being so smug about it all. I'm not denying what happened, I said quietly. It was wrong. I made a mistake. A mistake. Karen scoffed. Honey, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. A choice you've been making for months, from what I've heard. I froze. She knew. How much did she know? Mr. Daniels cleared his throat. We are not here to judge your personal life, but when it crosses into company grounds, during company hours, we have a problem. This is a serious violation of workplace policy. I nodded, my heart pounding. My marriage was already in danger, and now my job, my financial security, was hanging by a thread. He leaned forward. I'm going to need an honest answer from you, Claire. How long has this been going on? I hesitated, glancing at Karen, who looked ready to pounce on whatever I said. A few months, I admitted, but it never affected my work. I always made sure to get my job done. That's not the point, Karen cut in sharply. You use company space for that. And do you know what kind of position that puts the company in legally if someone complains? Or if your husband finds out and comes here? Her words stung because they hit too close to the truth. If Ethan found out, he wouldn't just be hurt, he'd be humiliated. And knowing him, he might just show up here to cause a scene. Mr. Daniels sighed. Claire, I have to put you on administrative leave while we investigate. You'll be contacted in a few days regarding the decision. The finality in his voice felt like a door slamming shut. When I left the HR office, I found Alex leaning against the wall in the hallway waiting. His expression was tight, his jaw clenched. What did they say? He asked. I shook my head. Administrative leave. You. Same, he muttered. Karen's making this worse than it is. We're adults. It was consensual. She's acting like we committed some kind of crime. Maybe because it happened at work. I snapped, my nerves frayed. We were careless, Alex. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Don't, I said. Not here. Not now. His face softened. Claire, we'll figure this out. I don't regret what we had. I didn't answer. Because deep down, I wasn't sure if I regretted it either, at least, not the moments when it was just us. But the consequences, those were impossible to ignore now. I drove home in silence, my mind spinning. How was I going to explain this to Ethan if I lost my job? What lie could I tell that wouldn't crumble under the slightest bit of pressure? When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan's car was already there. He wasn't supposed to be home this early. My stomach sank. I stepped inside, forcing a smile. Hey, you're home early. He was sitting on the couch, his phone in his hand, his eyes cold. Yeah, he said flatly. Got a text from someone at your work today. Said I should ask you about the storage room. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Ethan, Don't lie to me, Claire. His voice was sharp, loud enough to make me flinch. Who is he? I froze, every excuse I'd been preparing on the drive home vanishing from my mind. It's Alex, I admitted quietly. His laugh was bitter. Alex, the guy from the office parties. The one you said was just a friend. I couldn't meet his eyes. Ethan stood up, his hands on his hips, pacing the room. How long? I whispered. A few months. The hurt in his eyes was worse than his anger. Do you have any idea what you've done? You've made a fool out of me, Claire. At work, no less. Do you know how humiliating this is? I wanted to tell him I hadn't meant for any of this to happen. That it wasn't about love, that it was just something I got swept up in. But I knew those words wouldn't matter to him now. Ethan, I'm sorry, I said, my voice breaking. I messed up. I didn't think. No, he cut me off. You did think. And you still did it. The fight that followed was ugly. Words were thrown like knives, sharp and impossible to take back. By the end of it, Ethan grabbed his keys and left the house, slamming the door behind him. I sank onto the couch, my face buried in my hands, the weight of everything crashing down. My marriage was in pieces, my job was hanging by a thread, and the affair that had once felt like an escape now felt like a prison I'd built myself. And here's where I'll pause to say this. If you've been following the story, if you felt the tension, the guilt, the unraveling, hit that like button and subscribe for more dramatic tales that will pull you right into the middle of the storm. Because trust me, this storm is far from over. A week later, the company called. My position had been terminated. Alex too. There was no severance, no kind words, just a reminder that I'd violated policy and that my employment record would reflect it. Alex called me that night. "So this is it, huh?" "I guess so," I said quietly. "We could still, see each other," he offered. But I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No, Alex. We burned too much for this. I need to figure out what's left of my life." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. The thrill, the temptation, the secret moments, they were all gone now, replaced by silence and loss. Sometimes, the price of desire isn't worth paying. And when you've lost everything, you're left with nothing but the echo of your own choices. So here's my last word to you: don't miss the next story. Like, subscribe, and stay with me. Because real life, it's messier than you think.